Hello and welcome to Arnie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Sinister Mask. On a fog-choked autumn evening, the majestic halls of the Osborne house on the Isle of Wight were lit by 1,000 flickering candles. Holly Arnold, dressed in an elegant scarlet gown and a feathered black mask, arrived for the annual masquerade ball, an event she had anticipated for weeks. The estate shimmered with opulence, its grandeur veiled in an eerie stillness that seemed to thicken with each passing hour. As Holly mingled with other guests, she noticed something odd about the masks they wore. Intricately crafted and elaborate, each mask seemed to draw life from the wearer's gaze, as if amplifying their very souls. Some glittered with jewels, while others were painted with twisted smiles or sorrowful frowns. But one mask stood out among the rest, a dark, ominous creation adorned with glistening feathers and blackened teeth that belonged to a man lurking at the edge of the ballroom. The masked man's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, following Holly's every move. She felt a chill, as though she were being lured into a game she couldn't understand. At midnight, the music halted, and a ripple of silence spread across the room. The chandeliers flickered, casting elongated shadows on the walls, and a strange, oppressive weight filled the air. The host, an eccentric art collector named Mr. Devonshire, raised a glass and announced, "Tonight, let us toast to life and to the masks that shield us from our darkest selves." But as he finished his toast, the masks on the guests' faces seemed to twist and shudder. Holly gasped, watching as a mask on a nearby woman distorted, the painted face appearing to grin wider and wider until it didn't seem possible for her skin to contain it. One by one the guests began to feel the pull. It started with a shiver, a pressure against their temples, and soon enough a few stumbled as though something else had taken hold of their limbs. Holly's heart raced, and she attempted to lift her mask to breathe more easily, but the mask wouldn't budge. The strap clung tightly, pressing against her skin with an icy grip. It was as if the mask had rooted itself into her flesh. People around her started to disappear, vanishing from the ballroom floor in disturbing silence. She watched helplessly as they seemed to dissolve into the shadows, leaving only their masks behind. The masks, now empty, continued to hover in the air, grinning and glaring with an unsettling intelligence of their own. Panic swept through the remaining guests, their voices blending into a rising symphony of terror. A hand grabbed Holly's arm, yanking her back into a concealed corner. It was Mr. Devonshire, his mask cracked, but still fused to his face. "You must find the mask, the one that controls them all," he whispered. "It's ancient cursed, its power binds every mask here. If you don't destroy it, we'll all become part of it." Holly nodded, the weight of the mask on her face becoming unbearable. She looked back into the ballroom, where the masked man she'd seen earlier stood in the center of the room. His mask, the dark one adorned with feathers and teeth, pulsated as if it were a living, breathing creature. It drew her gaze with an almost magnetic pull, whispering secrets just out of reach. Before she knew it, she was moving towards him, her footsteps muffled by an otherworldly silence. As she approached, the air grew colder, and the ground beneath her seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. She could feel her mask tighten around her face, and a strange, distant voice whispered in her ear, "Become one of us." With the final step, Holly reached the masked figure. She could feel her own face merging with the mask, her mind blurring as her will was slowly eroded. But just before her thoughts fully vanished, she reached out, ripping the sinister mask from the man's face. As she tore it free, the mask let out a deafening scream that shook the walls of the ballroom. The mask writhed in her hand, pulsing like a creature, its cold, leathery texture growing warmer with each passing moment. Holly summoned the last of her strength and hurled the mask into the roaring fireplace. As the cursed mask burned, the air cleared, and the other masks fell lifeless from the guests' faces. The man she had amassed slumped to the floor, his skin pale, his eyes hollow. One by one, the masks crumbled into ash, releasing the guests they had consumed. But as Holly looked down at her hands, she noticed a dark residue on her skin, an imprint from the sinister mask that had briefly taken her. The memory of that voice, its chilling, seductive promise echoed in her mind, lingering in the silence of the ballroom. Holly left the ball that night, but she knew part of her had been claimed, a fragment of her soul now forever bound to the shadow of Osborne House. And every year, when the autumn fog rolled over the Isle of Wight, whispers would spread about the scarlet-gowned woman who haunted the halls, her face hidden by a mask that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. In the months that followed, Holly tried to move on, but the night at Osborne House haunted her. Sometimes, when she glanced in a mirror, she saw something else in her reflection eyes that gleamed with a knowing darkness, a faint outline of a mask lingering just beneath her skin. She tried to tell herself it was just her imagination, a remnant of trauma, but she knew the truth. Part of that cursed mask had latched onto her soul. One evening, while walking alone near the beach, Holly felt the familiar, cold pull. The wind whispered around her, carrying faint music waltzes and laughter that no one else could hear. She stopped, closing her eyes, hoping it would fade. But when she opened them, the beach was gone, and she was back in the ballroom, now empty, its grandeur decayed and cloaked in shadows. "Oh, welcome back, Holly." The voice was smooth and rich, with the same magnetic pull she had felt from the masked man at the ball. She turned, and there he was, his face no longer hidden. His features were handsome but twisted, his skin bearing faint, shadowy impressions of countless masks he had worn. "Ah?" Holly demanded, her voice trembling despite her attempts to sound strong. He smiled, a smile that sent chills through her spine. You're not just here, Holly. You're here. Part of you belongs to me now." He gestured around the room, and ghostly figures began to materialize, each wearing a mask that flickered between beauty and horror. She recognized the masks from that night, the mournful faces, the twisted grins, the ones that had dissolved into ash. As Holly backed away, her reflection appeared in the ballroom's tarnished mirrors, but it wasn't her own face staring back. The mask she'd worn at the ball was there, black and feathered, its once inanimate features now alive with a sinister intelligence. She watched, transfixed, as her reflection grinned, the expression sharper and crueler than anything she could have managed. She looked down at her hands, horrified to see them covered in fine, dark feathers, her nails elongating into sharp, ink-eyed claws. Panic surged within her, but when she tried to scream, her voice came out muffled, as if something were pressing down on her, strangling her thoughts. "You see," the masked man said, drawing closer, "Osborne House's masquerade has been held for centuries. The masks draw from those who wear them." He tilted his head, eyes gleaming. "And now, you are our newest addition." Holly tried to pull away, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. The masked spirits circled her, their eyes glowing with an insatiable hunger. She felt her mind slipping, thoughts scattering like dry leaves, pulled by an unseen force. The dark whisper from her own reflection taunted her, echoing through her mind. "You're one of us now." The figure gestured, and suddenly she was engulfed in darkness. The sounds of music and laughter faded to an eerie silence, but the weight of the mask remained, pressing on her, fusing with her thoughts, her very soul. In the years that followed, the legend of Holly Arnold grew. Locals spoke of a new spectre haunting Osborne House, one wearing a feathered black mask that hid eyes gleaming with a predatory glint. Each autumn the story would surface, and some brave souls would venture into the estate's abandoned ballroom, daring to glimpse the scarlet-gowned spirit who lingered in the shadows. And sometimes, on misty nights, those visitors would hear faint, haunting whispers, promises laced with dark temptation, calling them to join the masquerade. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had a great day.